The transport ship screamed as it fell through the orange sky of 7, held tight to her seat while fire and smoke filled the cabin around her. The pilot was already dead. A piece of metal had gone through his chest when the first missile hit them. Now there was only, and the ground was coming fast. She was not a soldier. She was a medic. She had joined the medical corps because she wanted to save lives, not take them. But the war between her people and the humans did not care about such things. Her transport had simply been in the wrong place when the fighting started. Human patrol ships and raiders had exchanged fire above this empty world, and her small medical vessel had been caught between them. The ship hit the ground with a terrible sound. Metal twisted and broke. Felt pain explode through her left arm as she was thrown from her seat. Then everything went dark. When she opened her eyes, the sky above her was turning from orange to deep purple. Night was coming. On 7, night meant death. The temperature would drop far below freezing. The predators that hid during the day would come out to hunt. And she was lying in the wreckage of her ship with a broken arm and cuts all over her body. Forced herself to move. Every motion brought fresh waves of pain, but she had been trained to work through pain. She crawled back into what remained of the ship and found a small space that still had walls around it. The emergency beacon was flashing red nearby. It had activated automatically when the ship crashed. Help would come. But her people were far away, and even the fastest rescue ship would take days to reach this remote world. She might not have days. Wrapped her broken arm as best she could with strips torn from her uniform. She found a small emergency kit and used the medical supplies inside to close the worst of her cuts. But she had no food, very little water, and no way to make heat. The cold was already creeping into the broken ship. Her people had taught her many things about humans. They were violent. They were cruel. They killed without mercy and showed no compassion to other species. The war had been going on for longer than had been alive, and every child grew up hearing stories about human brutality. Had lost her brother to human soldiers when she was young. She had every reason to hate them. But right now, alone and injured on this hostile world, did not think about hate. She thought about survival. She thought about the cold that was making her body shake. She thought about the strange sounds coming from the darkness outside the wreckage. Then she saw the lights. At first she thought she was imagining them. Small points of yellow light moving through the darkness toward the crash site. But as they came closer, she knew they were real. Someone was coming. Someone with lights and purpose, walking across the dangerous landscape of 7 as if they belonged here. Felt fear rise in her chest. This world was supposed to be empty. It sat in the buffer zone between human space, and neither side claimed it. No one was supposed to live here, but someone did, and they were coming for her. She tried to hide herself deeper in the wreckage. Her broken arm screamed in protest as she moved, but she ignored it. She found a dark corner and pressed herself into it, making herself as small as possible. Her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. The lights stopped outside the ship. She heard footsteps on metal. Someone was climbing into the wreckage. Then she saw him. He was human. There was no mistaking the shape of his body, the structure of his face. He was older than she expected, with hair and deep lines around his eyes. He moved carefully through the broken ship, holding a light in one hand. He wore simple clothes, not a military uniform, but that meant nothing. Knew that humans were dangerous even without uniforms. He found the dead pilot first. He stood over the body for a long moment and saw something in his face that she did not expect. Sadness. Respect. He reached down and closed the pilot's eyes with a gentle touch. Then he turned, and his light found her hiding place. Stopped breathing. This was it. This was how she would die, not from the cold or the predators, but from a human who had found her helpless and alone. She thought about her brother, killed by creatures just like this one. At least she would join him soon. The human looked at her for a long time. His eyes moved over her injuries, taking in the broken arm, the blood on her uniform, the fear on her face. She waited for him to raise a weapon. She waited for the violence that her people had always promised would come from humans. Instead, he did something she never could have predicted. He lowered himself to one knee, bringing his face closer to her level. He set down his light so that it was not shining directly in her eyes, and then he extended his hand toward her. His palm was open, his fingers were relaxed. There was no weapon, no threat, no anger in his posture. He simply held out his hand and waited. Stared at him, she did not understand. This was not what humans did. This was not what she had been taught. Humans killed. They did not kneel beside them and offer their hands. The human spoke. His voice was rough but quiet, and she was shocked to realize he was speaking her language. The words were awkward, the pronunciation was wrong, but she understood them. "You are hurt," he said. "I can help. Will you let me?" She did not move. She could not move. Everything she knew about humans told her this was a trick, a trap, a cruel game before the killing began. But his eyes were not cruel. They were tired and sad and something else she could not name, something that looked almost like kindness. The cold was getting worse. Her body was shaking badly now. She knew that if she stayed here, she would die before morning. The choice was simple: die alone in the wreckage or take the hand of an enemy and see what happened next. Reached out with her unbroken arm. She took the human's hand. The human lifted her as if she weighed nothing. He was careful with her broken arm, holding her in a way that did not cause more pain. Was too cold and too weak to resist. She let him carry her through the darkness, away from the wreckage of her ship and into the unknown. His name was Cole. She learned this later, but in those first moments, she knew nothing about him except that he was warm and she was freezing. Her body pressed against his chest as he walked, and she could feel his heart beating. It was steady and calm, not the heartbeat of a killer preparing to strike. They walked for what felt like hours but was probably less than one. The light she had seen earlier came from a device attached to his shoulder, leaving his hands free to carry her. He moved across the dangerous terrain of Seven with confidence, stepping around rocks and avoiding the places where predators might hide. He knew this world. He had learned its secrets. Finally, they reached his home. It was built into the side of a hill, with thick walls and a heavy door that sealed tight against the cold. Inside, the air was warm. Felt her body begin to relax for the first time since the crash. Carried her to a small room that looked like a medical bay. It was simple but clean, with a bed and cabinets full of supplies. He set her down on the bed with the same gentleness he had shown since finding her. Then he stepped back and looked at her injuries with the careful eyes of someone who had seen many wounds before. Watched him and waited for the change. She waited for the kindness to fade and the cruelty to appear. But it did not come. Simply opened a cabinet and began taking out medical supplies. He moved slowly and showed her everything before he used it, giving her the chance to refuse. She did not refuse. She was too tired to refuse. He cleaned her cuts first, using something that stung but stopped the bleeding. He worked without speaking, his hands steady and sure. When he reached her broken arm, he paused and looked at her face. "This will hurt," he said in his rough, "I am sorry." Then he set the bone. Screamed. The pain was terrible, worse than the crash itself, but held her arm firmly until the bone was back in place, and then he wrapped it in a splint that held everything still. When it was done, the pain faded to a dull ache. She could breathe again. Cleaned his hands and put away his supplies. Lay on the bed and watched him, still waiting for the violence, still expecting the worst. But he simply pulled a chair to the side of the bed and sat down. He looked at her with those tired, sad eyes. And then he asked her a question. "Are you hungry?" Did not understand. She must have misheard. She must have been confused by his poor pronunciation. But he asked again, and this time she was sure. "Food," he said. "Do you need food?" She stared at him. This was the enemy. This was a human, a member of the species that had killed her brother and so many others. and he was asking if she wanted something to eat. Yes, she said, because she could not think of anything else to say. Nodded and left the room. Heard sounds from somewhere else in the home, the sounds of cooking. A few minutes later, he returned with a bowl and a cup. The bowl contained some kind of vegetable mixture, and the cup held water. I studied your people, he said, setting the food beside her. I know what can eat, this is safe. She ate because her body demanded it. The food was simple but good, seasoned with something that reminded her of home. The water was clean and cold. Sat in his chair and watched her eat, asking for nothing in return. When she was finished, he took the empty bowl and cup. Then he returned to his chair. Sleep, he said, you are safe here. Did not believe him. She could not believe him. But her body was exhausted and the bed was warm, and eventually her eyes closed despite her fear. When she woke, it was morning. Light came through a small window, showing her the room more clearly. Was gone, but she could hear him moving around somewhere else in the home. The door to her room was open. He had not locked her in. He had not restrained her. She was free to leave whenever she wanted. Sat up slowly, testing her body. Her cuts were sore but healing. Her arm hurt, but the splint held it steady. She felt better than she had any right to feel after such a terrible crash. She stood and walked to the door. Beyond it was a larger room with a kitchen area and shelves full of books and strange objects. Was there, cooking something over a small stove. He looked up when she appeared. Good morning, he said. More food. She nodded and he prepared another meal for her. They ate together in silence, sitting at a small table, looked around the room while she ate. There were no weapons anywhere that she could see. No military equipment, just books and tools and the small personal items of a man living alone. Why are you here? She asked finally. Finished his food before answering. Because both sides leave this place alone, because I wanted to stop fighting. You were a soldier. For 20 years. His voice was flat, empty of pride. I killed many of your people. Now I grow vegetables and read books. It is better. Did not know what to say. She had never met a human who spoke of killing with sadness instead of pride. She had never imagined such a human could exist. You could have left me to die, she said. Looked at her with those tired eyes. Yes. Why did you not? He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. Because I am tired of death. Because helping is better than hurting. Because you were cold and scared and alone, and I could do something about it. He stood and took their empty dishes to the kitchen, watched him and felt something crack inside her understanding of the universe. Everything she knew about humans said this man should not exist, but he did exist. He was real, and he had saved her life for no reason except that he could. She stayed another night and then another. Her rescue was still days away. And slowly, carefully, she began to see Cole not as an enemy, but as something else entirely. On the third day, felt strong enough to walk around the homestead. Showed her the small garden where he grew food, the water recycling system that kept him alive, and the power generator that protected him from the cold nights. He had built all of it himself over many years. He knew every stone and wire of this place. She watched him work and asked questions, and he answered them simply and honestly. He never avoided her eyes. He never hesitated to tell her things about himself. It was strange. Among her own people, talking to an enemy would mean careful words and hidden meanings, but spoke to her like she was just another person, not a representative of everything he had once fought against. You speak my language, she said one morning. How did you learn? Was repairing a broken pipe, his hands covered in dirt. In the military, they taught us to understand your communications. I kept studying after I left. Why? He shrugged. I wanted to understand your people, not just fight them. Thought about this. She had never tried to learn the human language. She had never wanted to understand them. She had been happy to hate them from a distance, to see them as monsters instead of people. "Tell me about the war," she said. "Tell me what you did." Stopped working. He wiped his hands on his clothes and sat down on a nearby rock. For a long time he did not speak. His face showed pain that had nothing to do with physical injury. "I was good at killing," he said finally. "Very good. They gave me medals and promotions. They called me a hero. I believed them for a long time." "What changed?" He looked at her, and she saw the ghosts in his eyes. "We received intelligence that a shelter was hiding weapons. A civilian shelter in a small colony on the edge of your space. My team was sent to destroy it before the weapons could be used against our people." Felt cold despite the warm air. She knew what was coming. "We attacked at night," continued. "We were fast and efficient. We killed everyone inside before they could fight back. Then we searched the building for the weapons." His voice broke. He took a breath and steadied himself. "There were no weapons, only families, mothers and fathers and children, old ones and young ones. They were not soldiers. They were people trying to survive, and we killed them all because someone gave us wrong information." Did not know what to say. She had grown up with stories of human cruelty, but those stories had always shown humans as evil, enjoying the suffering they caused. Was not enjoying this memory. It was tearing him apart. "I could not continue after that," he said. "I asked for discharge. They did not want to let me go. I was too valuable, but I refused to fight anymore. Eventually they had no choice." "So you came here?" "I came here to disappear, to stop being a weapon, to try to become something better." They sat in silence for a while. A cold wind blew across the rocky landscape, carrying dust and the smell of distant rain. Thought about her brother, killed by humans when she was just a child. She had never known the details. She had never wanted to know. Now she wondered if his death had been as meaningless as the deaths described. "My brother was killed by your people," she said quietly. "I was very young. I remember my mother screaming. I remember the funeral where we sent his body to the stars. I grew up hating humans because of that day." Nodded slowly. "I am sorry. I cannot change what happened. I cannot bring him back. All I can do is stop adding to the list of the dead." "Is that why you saved me? Because you feel guilty?" He thought about this. "No, I saved you because you needed help. Guilt is part of why I live here alone. But kindness is different from guilt. Kindness is choosing to help even when you have nothing to make up for." Looked at this strange human who had once been a killer and now grew vegetables in a garden. She tried to fit him into her understanding of the universe, but he would not fit. He broke all the rules she had been taught. That night, she shared her own story. She told him about becoming a medic, about wanting to heal instead of harm. She told him about the patients she had saved and the ones she had lost. She told him about the transport mission that had brought her to this world, carrying medical supplies to a colony that needed them. "We are alike in some ways," said. "We both wanted something better than war." Before could respond, a terrible sound came from outside. Something was scratching at the walls of the homestead. Something big. Moved fast. He grabbed a tool that could be used as a weapon and pushed behind him. The scratching grew louder, more insistent. Then something hit the door with enormous force. "Hound," said, "they sometimes come to the homestead looking for food. Stay behind me." The door shook again. Whatever was out there was strong enough to break through eventually. Positioned himself between and the door, ready to face the creature. When the door finally gave way, the thing that came through was like nothing had ever seen. It was all teeth and claws and muscle, built for killing in this harsh environment. Met it with his makeshift weapon, striking it hard across the face. The fight was brutal and short. Drove the creature back through the broken door, but not before its claws raked across his chest. Blood soaked through his shirt as the hound retreated into the darkness, wounded but alive. Collapsed against the wall. His face was pale and his breathing was ragged. Blood poured from the deep cuts on his chest. Did not hesitate. She ran to him and pressed her hands against the wounds to slow the bleeding. She shouted for him to stay awake, to look at her, to keep breathing. For the first time since the crash, she was the one in control. She was the one doing the saving. And she was saving a human. Worked through the night to save Cole. She used everything in his medical bay, everything she had learned in her years as a medic. The cuts from the hound were deep and jagged, and one of them had come close to something vital. But her hands were steady and her training was good, and by the time the sun rose was stable. He slept for most of the next day, sat beside his bed and watched him breathe. She had never saved a human before. She had treated many patients and she had lost some of them despite her best efforts. But this was different. This was the enemy. This was someone she was supposed to hate. She did not hate him. She was not sure when that had changed, but it had changed completely. Looking at his sleeping face, she saw only a tired man who had chosen kindness over violence. Woke in the evening. His eyes found her immediately, and he gave her a weak smile. "You saved my life," he said. "You saved mine first." He nodded and closed his eyes again, but he was smiling. 2 days later, was strong enough to sit up and eat solid food. Had repaired the broken door as best she could, and the homestead was secure again. She was examining his wounds when her communication device made a sound she had not heard since the crash. Someone was trying to contact her. She answered, and the face that appeared on the small screen was commander of the military. He was an older male with hard eyes and a stern expression. Had met him once before during a supply mission. He was known for his hatred of humans. "Medical officer," said, "we received your distress beacon. A rescue ship has entered the system. We will reach your location within 6 hours. Report your status." Looked at who was watching from his bed. He understood enough to know what was happening. His face showed no fear, only quiet acceptance. "I am alive and recovering," said. "My transport crashed and the pilot did not survive." "Are you alone?" Our sensors detected a structure near the crash site. This was the moment. Knew that if she told about, the commander would send soldiers to capture or kill him. Cole would become a prisoner at best, a corpse at worst. His quiet life on this hostile world would end. She made her choice. "I found an abandoned shelter," she said. "It appears someone lived here once, but it was empty when I arrived. I have been using its supplies to survive." Studied her through the screen. His eyes were suspicious, searching for lies. "You are certain there are no humans present?" "I am certain." A long pause, then nodded. "Very well, remain where you are. We will collect you soon." The communication ended. Let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. When she looked at, she found him staring at her with something like wonder in his eyes. "You lied for me," he said. "Yes." "Why? Your career could be destroyed if they discover the truth. They could call you a traitor." Sat down beside his bed. Her hands were shaking slightly, and she was not sure if it was from fear or something else. "Because you showed me that humans can be kind. Because you saved my life when you had no reason to. Because killing you or sending you to prison would be wrong, and I will not be part of wrong things." Was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I am not worth the risk you are taking. You are worth more than you know." They sat together in silence as the hours passed. 6 hours until rescue. 6 hours until would leave this hostile world and return to her life among the stars. 6 hours until she would never see Cole again. He seemed to sense her thoughts. He pushed himself up in bed and reached for a small device on the table nearby. It was a data chip, the kind used to store documents and recordings. "I have been writing," he said, "for years. About the war, about what I did, about what I learned. I never shared it with anyone because I did not think anyone would care, but maybe someone should read it." He held the chip out to her. "If you think these words have value, share them with your people. Let them see that not all humans are monsters. Let them see that peace is possible. Took the chip. It was small and light, but it felt heavy in her hand. I will read it, she said. And if it says what I think it says, I will make sure others read it too. Smiled. It was a real smile this time, not just a twitch of his lips. She had never seen him smile like that before. What will you do after I leave? She asked. The same thing I always do. Repair my home, tend my garden, read my books, wait. Wait for what? He looked at her with those tired, sad eyes that had seen so much death and had chosen to stop adding to it. I do not know, I never knew, but maybe now I have something to wait for. Felt tears forming in her eyes. She blinked them away. She was not someone who cried, but this moment, this goodbye to a human who had changed everything she believed, was harder than she had expected. I will come back, she said. When the war ends, when there is peace, I will come back and find you. That could be never. Then I will work to make it happen sooner. The sound of engines came from outside. The rescue ship was early, stood and gathered her few belongings. She looked at one last time. Thank you, she said, for the food, for the shelter, for showing me that I was wrong about your people. Nodded, thank you for saving my life, and for lying to protect me. I will not forget. Walked to the repaired door and stepped outside into the cold air of 7. The rescue ship was landing nearby, its lights bright against the sky. She did not look back. If she looked back, she might not be able to leave. The rescue ship was cold and sterile, sat in a passenger seat while Commander asked her questions about the crash. She answered them carefully, keeping her lies consistent. Yes, she had found the shelter abandoned. No, she had not seen any humans. Yes, she understood how lucky she was to have survived. Watched her with suspicious eyes, but he could prove nothing. Eventually, he left her alone and stared out the window at the stars and thought about Cole. She read his writings during the journey home. The data chip contained years of thoughts and memories, written in simple words that any reader could understand. He wrote about the battles he had fought and the lives he had taken. He wrote about the guilt that drove him to 7. He wrote about his hope that someday humans might find a way to stop killing each other. By the time she reached her, had read everything twice. The words burned in her mind like a fire that would not go out. 6 months passed. Did not go back to being a simple medic. She could not. Had changed something inside her, and she could not pretend that change had not happened. Instead, she began to speak about peace. At first, it was just to her friends and family. Then it was to larger groups. Then it was to anyone who would listen. She shared writings with those she trusted. The words spread slowly, passed from one reader to another like a secret. A human who regretted his violence. A human who chose kindness over cruelty. A human who believed peace was possible. Not everyone believed. Many called her naive or foolish or worse. Commander heard rumors about her activities and summoned her for questioning, but had done nothing illegal. She had only told people what she believed, could not punish her for that. The writings continued to spread. They reached politicians and generals, teachers and students, ordinary people who had lost family to the war and wanted it to end. A movement began to form, small at first, then larger. People began demanding negotiations. People began demanding peace. And then 6 months after left 7, something incredible happened. The government announced that they would meet with human representatives to discuss ending the war. It would be the first peace summit in decades. The announcement made it clear that public pressure had played a role in the decision. The people had demanded change, and the government had listened. Was invited to join the diplomatic delegation as an advisor. Someone had told the politicians about her experience on 7, about the abandoned shelter she had found, about her new passion for peace. They did not know about, they could never know, but they wanted her perspective anyway. She said yes. The summit was held on a neutral station between human and space. watched the negotiations with hope and fear mixed together in her chest. There were arguments and disagreements, moments when everything seemed about to collapse. But there were also moments of connection, moments when representatives from both sides saw each other as people instead of enemies. On the final day of the summit, an agreement was reached. Not complete peace, but a ceasefire and a promise to continue talking. It was a beginning. It was more than anyone had achieved in generations. Stood at a window and watched human and delegates shake hands. She thought about Cole, alone in his homestead on Seven, probably not even knowing that his words had helped make this moment possible. She had to tell him, she had to see him again. It took another month to arrange the trip. The ceasefire made travel between territories easier and used her new position to secure passage to the buffer zone. When her ship entered orbit around Seven, she felt her heart beating fast with anticipation and fear. What if was gone? What if something had happened to him? What if he had changed his mind about everything? She landed near his homestead on a cold morning. The sky was heavy with clouds and the wind carried the smell of rain. Everything looked the same as when she had left. The repaired door, the small garden, the walls built into the hillside. She walked toward the homestead on shaking legs. Before she reached the door, it opened. Cole stepped outside. He looked older than she remembered, more in his hair, more lines on his face. But his eyes were the same, tired and sad and kind. He saw her and stopped. For a long moment they simply looked at each other across the rocky ground. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them moved. Then walked toward him. She stopped an arm's length away and looked into his face. He was real. He was alive. He was still here. She extended her hand toward him. Her palm was open. Her fingers were relaxed. She held out her hand and waited, just as he had done for her in the wreckage of her ship so many months ago. And then she asked him a question. "Are you hungry?" Stared at her. His eyes grew wet with tears he did not try to hide. He understood what she was asking. The question had never been about food. It had always been about something deeper. "Are you in need? Can I help? Will you let me be kind to you?" He smiled. It was the second real smile she had ever seen on his face, and it transformed him. The sadness was still there, but now there was something else too. Hope, joy, the beginning of something new. He took her hand. "Yes," he said, "I am." They walked together into the homestead, and the door closed behind them. Outside, the wind continued to blow across the hostile surface of Seven. But inside, there was warmth and food, and two people who had found each other across the vast distance of war. The fighting was not over. The peace was fragile and uncertain. There would be more arguments, more setbacks, more moments when everything seemed hopeless. But on this cold morning, on a world where no one was supposed to live, a human veteran and a medic sat down to share a meal together. They talked about the future. They talked about the past. They talked about the small question that had changed everything between them. "Are you hungry?" Such a simple question, such a human question. And in that question, finally understood what made humans different from the monsters of her childhood stories. It was not their strength or their violence or their stubbornness. It was their ability to reach out a hand to a stranger and offer help without expecting anything in return. It was their capacity for kindness. She had come to this hostile world expecting death. Instead, she had found something worth living for, and she would spend the rest of her life making sure others found it too.